Most people think that cash flow comes from spreadsheets and smart analysis, and those definitely help. But what if I told you that your biggest cash flow boost might come from a single, uncomfortable conversation? The kind of conversations that make your palms sweat, that make your stomach twist, but also the kinds of conversations that get results. In this Coach's Corner episode, let's talk about those sweaty palm conversations that change everything. Hey everyone, my name is Chad Carson. You can also call me Coach Carson. And in this channel, I teach you how to use real estate investing to become financially free so you can spend your time doing more of what matters. So I have a single motivation for this episode and why I wanted to share it with you. As I think back about my 22 years in real estate investing, almost every single good thing, when I made cash flow, when I made money, when I built profit in real estate investing in my business, it came on the other side of a sweaty palm conversation. So these difficult conversations. And I want to tell you a few stories about how that's played out in my business, just to give you some examples. And then I'm going to give you a couple of ideas on how you can approach your own sweaty palm conversations. And so recently I was reminded of a pattern that's happened over and over and again in my 22 years of real estate investing. And it's this, is that I look at a property and often I'm talking directly to a seller, like I send out letters or I just like reach out to a seller when I see a property that's vacant or that I like in a location. Sometimes though, it's through a real estate agent. In this case, I had two different situations, one through a real estate agent and another property that I had reached out directly to the seller from a referral from somebody else. In both cases though, the common theme was I looked at these properties. They were asking one price, and let's just call it like $290,000 in one case. The other case was $390,000. So like almost 400,000, almost 300,000. My price that I was willing to pay was about $110,000 less in one case, and about $120,000 less. So a huge, huge gulf between what I'm willing to pay and what the seller's asking. And you know, my initial reaction to that is like, that's uncomfortable. Let's just walk away, because the little voice in my head says, if you make this offer, they're just going to reject it. In fact, they might even get mad, and let's just avoid situations where you're going to make people mad or uncomfortable. And let's just move on to something else. There's got to be an easier way. That's what this little voice in my head is saying. But what I have found over and over again in my business is that I need to make that offer. That is a sweaty palm conversation. So with the seller, I ended up meeting with him and we had a conversation. I had to think about, how do I present this in a way that, number one, doesn't make him mad, but that offers some value to him. And so I tried to bring some comparables. I tried to show some of the repairs that I thought I would do to the property. And it wasn't me like downing on the property. It's me saying, I think this has a potential to be worth more, but I think I need to do these things and spend about $70,000 in repairs in order to get it there. And here's some other examples of properties that have sold. And so I tried to be objective about it. And I said, based on that, here's the price I'm willing to pay. And if you sell it to me at that price, it's all cash. We could close on a date of your choice. You don't have to worry about, listings and doing all that stuff. So I sold the benefits of that. And that was my conversation. Now, in my conversation directly with the seller, he didn't say yes yet. I'm still following up. Maybe he'll say yes later on. But I had a similar situation with a listed property, and we made offers on that one, $110,000 less. And we just kept offering. I think we followed up, twice over a 2 or 3 month period. And they had actually had that property under contract about 5 other times, and it fell through. Inspection didn't work. They found it had a lot of problems, major repairs. And so ultimately, they came down to our price. That was the end result. 2 times, one that I have probably a 50-50 shot of getting, the other one that we actually have under contract, or actually we already bought it, because I had a sweaty palm conversation and I made an offer to a seller that was uncomfortable. That doesn't mean it's always going to work, but I've had this happen so many times in the past, even situations where the real estate agent said they'll never accept that offer. I make the offer and they accepted it eventually. So when it comes to buying properties, the name of the game are uncomfortable, sweaty palm conversations where you make offers that work for you as an investor. So those 2 stories are examples of the positive things that can happen to you in real estate investing when you talk to sellers, when you talk to private lenders, when you talk to people related to your business and have those uncomfortable conversations. But I want to share another story about getting out of bad situations. So it's not only the positive, profitable things, but it's also avoiding negative cash flow or negative situations. And a very brief version of this story is that in 2007, I was 27 years old. And I bought a lot of properties with my business partner that year, right before the Great Recession. So really bad timing, right? And one of the last properties we bought in 2007 was, I was at a bankruptcy auction, which I'd never been to before. We've been to a foreclosure auction, but not a bankruptcy auction. And I got into this bidding war with another investor, and I bid over the price that I was supposed to bid. My business partner and I, he was not there, but we had a price we wanted to pay. And somehow I lost rationality and I bid more. And it was a tough situation. I was really upset afterwards, kind of went back in the middle of the day and laid in my bed. And my now wife came there that day and was like, what is going on? Like, why are you laying in bed in the middle of the day? And so I had to get over that, like, fear that I'd done something really bad and overpaid. You could kind of see the storm clouds on the horizon. The market was changing. And so I had to have some sweaty palm conversations to kind of get ourselves out of that situation. And my conversations were going around and talking to local banks and to private lenders to loan me the money to buy and fix up this property. It was a little bit of a stretch. It was a 7-unit multifamily property. And so 7 duplexes, actually, so 14 units. And we had to borrow the money to buy it and borrow the money to fix it up. And we only had a little bit of cash. We didn't have much money. So I had to get 100% of the money to buy it and fix it up from a local bank and from a private lender who we'd borrowed money from before. That wasn't an easy conversation to have with them, but I kind of like with the sellers, I put my best foot forward. I showed the potential value of that property. I also showed that we had collateral on other properties and I'm willing to give you extra collateral if we do this. And in the end, I talked to several banks. We had one of them that decided to work with us, and we had a private lender who was willing to work with us. And that's what got us through that deal and got us over to the other side. We didn't make a lot of money on that deal in the end. We made some money, but it was like 7-8 years later and a lot of labor and a lot of time afterwards. But we bailed ourselves out of a potentially bad situation by having a sweaty palm conversation or a series of sweaty palm conversations with lenders. And so I've seen this pattern over and over again as I look back at my 22 years of real estate investing, is that the big positive good things that have happened and also just avoiding some really potentially negative situations have happened with these sweaty palm conversations. For example, we've had tenants who weren't paying on time. And that's frustrating for them. I'm sure they're afraid what's going to happen. It was frustrating for us because we're trying to pay our bills and we're trying to pay our mortgages and we're not getting rent coming in and we're having to face, having to file an eviction. I've done repeatedly, I've either gotten on the phone with a tenant or I've even showed up at the house and just had a conversation. And it has not been pleasant to do that. But the result of that for both the tenant and for me has been better than it would have been if we just kind of let it fester and just let it go. I also had a sweaty palm conversation this year with my business partner, and it wasn't necessarily a conflict, but we've had our LLC and our partnership for 22 years now, and we hadn't talked really specifically about some situations, what would happen if one of us died, and how the partnership would materialize after that fact. In fact, I reviewed our LLC, and there's just a few things that were like, I don't know that's going to work. I think we need to do it a little differently, and I had to have this conversation. It was a little uncomfortable because we're talking about dying, what's going to happen, and how would your spouse be related to the business and my spouse, and would we buy each other out? And specifically, if you were curious what that conversation was about, was whether we had to cash out the other partner's heirs whenever they died. And we didn't want that to happen. We wanted to give the remaining partner the ability to, if they wanted to, they had the option to buy out the heirs if they had enough cash to do it. But if it was a burden for them, we didn't want to make a burden for the other partner to have to come up with the money. So we have a way to figure out what the price would be that you would buy out the heirs, but we didn't want to put a burden on our partner. So I had that sweaty palm conversation and it ended up being great. Like, we both agreed and we both got through it. And that's often how it happens, is once you get over the tension of that initial conversation, then on the other side of that, everybody's relieved to have the conversation, and it just kind of goes downhill and gets a lot easier from there. And so I hope you get the point. I think you understand what a sweaty palm conversation is. I want to turn it back to you. And do you have some sweaty palm conversations that you need to have? Maybe it's an offer you need to make. Maybe you're talking to lenders or private lenders about an opportunity and you're just afraid that they're going to say no to you, so you hadn't had the conversation. Maybe you have a problem with a business partner, a tenant, a contractor. I'm sure there's something. Maybe even your personal life, there's a sweaty palm conversation you need to have. It works the same way. I want to give you a few tips that have worked for me and that I'm continuing to work on that have helped me to get to these sweaty palm conversations. And the first one is to write out what you want to talk about, at least the initial conversation. I find that the scariest things, it's kind of like a scary thing in the closet. When you don't look at it and when you don't try to identify what it is, it seems a lot scarier. But if you could just sit there and have some quiet time to yourself, either typing on a computer or write out how you will actually start the conversation. And then I like to make this some bullet points of what are the main points I want to talk about. And if you really want to be comfortable with it, you could write the whole thing out, not because you're going to say that word for word when you talk to the people, but it helps you identify how that conversation might go. So that's step number one. Actually just write it out. That'll make it less scary. The second step, though, is to actually practice it. So if you're going to have a conversation with a seller, with a lender, and you've never done this before and you're super, super nervous, have a mock conversation with your business partner, with your partner, with another investor. This is actually something we do a lot in our community, Rental Property Mastery. We have people who practice talking to each other as a seller and as a buyer, and they have those conversations. We give them a script, and then they can use that script to practice. So whether you're talking to a seller or a lender, find someone to have a mock conversation to practice it. You could even videotape it, kind of like people do in sports. They videotape it, and then you can rewind it. That's super uncomfortable to watch that, but you will get so much better if you practice those conversations. This is what professional sales organizations do. They film or record their conversations and they play it back. They listen to how they can get better. And then they also listen to people who do it really well so they can improve as well. So that's number two, do a practice. Number one, write it out. Number three is eventually you're just gonna have to do the conversation. I have a friend, Justin, who helps teach with me some in Rental Property Mastery. He's a great investor out of Oklahoma. And he always has this mantra of take massive, imperfect action. That's really the mantra of entrepreneurs. You're never going to be perfect. I can tell you that the first time you do some of these conversations, you're going to stumble over your words. It's going to be uncomfortable, but that's okay. Just have the mantra to yourself. I'm going to get better at this. I'm going to take massive, imperfect action. I'm just going to do it because like a muscle, if the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. But you can't just theorize yourself to having good conversations. You actually have to do them and you have to learn from them. You have to get better. Like after what I do often when I have a conversation that didn't go that well, I'll take notes, kind of like you did before the conversation, take notes. What could I have said differently? What could have been better? You're kind of watching game film of yourself after a conversation. If you have enough conversations and you debrief and do that afterwards, you'll get better and better. But most importantly, people have grace. They're gonna, you've actually brought this situation to them. It's probably going to be okay. Even if you stumble through it, just have the conversation. Even if it's imperfect, get it done. You'll feel a lot better as a result. So I started this episode by saying cash flow sometimes comes from good spreadsheets and good analysis, but many, many times it comes from people skills. And that's really what this is all about. This is about getting over ourselves and practicing communication with people. And so if this is something you want to get better at, hopefully those tips that I gave you, you can go practice it. But if you want to be in part of a community of other people who are practicing and getting better at this is something I do on a regular basis in Rental Property Mastery. It's a community that's basically a coaching and a learning community where small and mighty investors come together to get better at three core skills: buying properties, getting financing for their deals, and managing the actual operations of their rental properties so that they can achieve financial freedom and own properties in a small and mighty way, not having thousands of units, but having enough units to give you time and flexibility. So if you want to be part of a community, if you want to have conversations with me and get coaching from me to improve in this area or other parts of real estate investing, check out Rental Property Mastery. You can go to coachcarson.com/RPM. I'll also have a link in the YouTube and the podcast description below. And I would love to see you apply for that community. We're getting close to the 300 member cap. We're keeping the community small and mighty as well. And I would love for you to check that out. I hope there's one other big takeaway you got from this episode, and it's that all real estate investors make mistakes. I'm definitely included in that. You heard some of those mistakes that I had to have sweaty palm conversations to get out of. And I want to recommend my next episode, which is other mistakes that you can learn from that I have made as a real estate investor. It's called the top 5 real estate investing mistakes I've made buying properties. And I actually go into more detail about that auction that I told you about and buying that property, how I got into it, how we ultimately got out of it. So if you want to learn from those mistakes and not have to repeat them yourself, check that out. You can click on the thumbnail above me here if you're watching on YouTube, or you can click on the link in the YouTube or the podcast description below. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.